She braces her hand against the frozen ground, blood soaking through her skirt, as the sound of riders closes in. And the only man who stops for her doesn't reach for his gun, just waits. So why isn't she running? The wind drags across the ridge, lifting dust and loose snow into her face as Eliza Boone forces herself one step farther, then another, before her leg gives out beneath her. Hoofbeats echo somewhere behind the trees, closer now, too steady to be chance. She pulls the revolver from her coat, fingers stiff, and turns just as a tall rider dismounts in front of her, saying nothing, only setting a canteen in the dirt between them. She doesn't lower the gun. He doesn't move. And somehow, that stillness feels more dangerous than anything chasing her. Would you trust him? Or keep running while you still could? The shot cracked across the ridge and rolled down the mountains like thunder chasing itself. Eliza Boone stumbled. Her boot caught on a frozen root hidden beneath the thin crust of snow, and she went down hard on one knee. The pain came a second later, deep and burning, spreading from her thigh into her hip. She pressed her hand there, felt the wet through her skirt, warm against the cold. She didn't look back right away. The wind had already started to take her tracks. It moved steady through the pines, carrying loose snow and dust, softening the marks she'd left behind. Not enough. Not nearly enough. She pushed herself up again. One step, then another. Her breath came sharp, each pull of air scraping her throat raw. The sky was turning that dull copper color that came just before dark, the kind that made everything look farther away than it was. She tried to remember how long she'd been moving. 3 days, maybe, or longer. Time had started slipping somewhere between the first night and the second, when the cold got into her bones and stayed there. A branch snapped behind her. This time she did look back. Nothing. Just trees. Tall, still, and black against the fading light. But she knew better. They were still out there. She turned forward again and kept moving until her legs stopped listening. The ground rose in front of her, a slope dotted with low brush and a single pine twisted by wind. She made it halfway up before her strength gave out. Her hands hit the trunk, rough bark biting into her palms, and she slid down to the base of it. For a moment, everything went quiet. Not the wind, not the mountains, just inside her head. She closed her eyes, not to sleep, just to hold still long enough to think. The smell of iron was stronger now. She shifted her hand and saw the dark spreading through the fabric. Too much. It had been too much for a while. Her fingers tightened around the grip of the revolver at her side. She pulled it free, slow, careful, and laid it across her lap. If they came. Hoofbeats cut through the wind, far off at first, then closer. Eliza's eyes snapped open. Her hand found the gun again, lifting it though her arm trembled. She dragged herself a few inches deeper into the shadow of the tree, breath catching as the pain flared sharp enough to make her vision blur. The hoofbeats slowed, stopped. For a second, she thought she'd imagined it. Then she heard leather creak. A boot hit the ground. A man stepped into view between the trees, leading a chestnut horse by the reins. He was taller than anyone she'd seen in a long while, shoulders filling the space between the trunks as if the forest had grown too tight around him. He didn't come closer, didn't reach for anything, just stood there, watching. Eliza raised the gun, both hands now, forcing them steady. "Stay where you are." Her voice came out thinner than she wanted, but it carried. The man didn't move. After a moment, he let go of the reins. The horse lowered its head, steam rising from its nostrils into the cold air. The man reached into his coat. Eliza's finger tightened on the trigger. Slowly, he pulled out a metal canteen. He crouched, still a good distance away, and set it on the ground between them. Then he straightened again, hands empty, open at his sides. "I ain't stepping any closer," he said. His voice was low, not soft, just steady, like he'd said the same thing before and knew it would hold. Eliza didn't lower the gun. The wind shifted, pushing a strand of her hair across her face. She didn't move to brush it away. "You alone?" she asked. He nodded once. She watched him a long moment, searching for something, anything, that might tell her he was lying. His face was half in shadow beneath the brim of his hat. What she could see was worn, sun-cut, with a line of stubble along his jaw. His eyes didn't flicker, didn't wander, just stayed on her, not pressing, not pulling back, waiting. Her arm shook harder. The gun dipped a fraction. She forced it back up. The man glanced at her leg, then back at her face. "You're bleeding something bad," he said. "I know." Another second passed. Then he spoke again, same even tone. "Then stay awake." She blinked. "Dying's easier than living through it." The words landed without weight. No push behind them. No pity. Just a fact, laid out between them. Eliza swallowed. Her throat was dry enough it hurt. She looked at the canteen, then back at him. If he'd wanted her dead, he wouldn't be standing there talking. If he was with them, he would have come in shooting. Her grip loosened just a little. The barrel of the gun dipped an inch. Not lowered. Not yet. The man didn't take that inch. Didn't move forward. Didn't reach. Just stood there, waiting like the decision had nothing to do with him. The wind moved again, colder now. Eliza's fingers slipped on the grip. For a moment, she thought she might black out. She tightened her jaw, forced her eyes to stay open, and kept the gun where it was, between them, between trust and the dark closing in. She didn't fall. Not yet. The gun lowered first, not all the way, just enough that the barrel no longer pointed at his chest. The man noticed. He didn't say anything about it. He stepped forward once. Slow. Then again. Each step placed like he was testing ice. When he reached the canteen, he nudged it closer with the toe of his boot. Then he stopped again, leaving the last few feet to her. Eliza stared at it. Her hands were shaking worse now, not from fear alone. The cold had settled deep, and the blood loss was pulling her under inch by inch. She leaned forward. The movement sent a sharp pull through her leg. Her breath caught, but she kept going, dragging the canteen toward her with stiff fingers. The water was warm, not hot, just enough to not bite. She took a swallow, then another, forced herself to stop before her stomach turned. When she looked up again, he was still watching. Same distance, same stillness. "What's your name?" she asked. He hesitated. "Caleb." No last name. She nodded once, like that was enough. He glanced at the sky. The light was thinning fast now, slipping behind the ridge. "You won't make the night out here," he said. "I've made worse." "Maybe," he said. "Not like that." His eyes dropped to her leg again, not staring, just marking what he needed to know. Eliza followed his gaze, then looked back at him. "You got a place?" she asked. He nodded. "Cabin. 1/2 mile." She let out a slow breath, thought about it. 1/2 mile might as well have been 10. "If I say no?" she asked. He shrugged once. "Then I leave the canteen." That was it. No push, no bargain, just a line drawn and left alone. Eliza looked past him, into the trees, where the dark was already settling in. She knew what was behind her, or who. She shifted, tried to stand, and nearly went down again. Caleb moved then, fast enough to catch her before she hit the ground, but careful. His hands didn't grab. They steadied, one at her elbow, one hovering near her back, not quite touching unless she leaned. She did, just for a second. Then she pulled away, straightened as much as she could. "I can walk," she said. He didn't argue. They made it 3 steps. On the 4th, her leg gave. This time he didn't wait. He bent, one arm under her knees, the other at her back, and lifted her clean off the ground. Eliza tensed, breath sharp. Her hand went for the gun again, then stopped halfway. He held her like she weighed less than the coat on his shoulders. Not tight, not loose, steady. "Put me down," she said. "You'll slow us," he answered. "I said, you can keep the gun," he cut in, quiet. "Just don't shoot me unless you mean it." That stopped her. She looked at him then, properly. Up close, he looked older than she'd first thought. Lines at the corners of his eyes, not from smiling. He shifted her weight once, settling her more securely against his chest, then started toward the trees. The horse followed behind, reins dragging loose. The walk took longer than he'd said. The ground dipped and rose, patches of ice hidden beneath loose dirt. The wind picked up as they cleared the thicker trees, carrying the smell of wood smoke faint on the air. Eliza noticed that. "Yours?" she asked. He nodded. They came over a low rise and the cabin came into view, small, set back from the trail. One window lit with a lantern, casting a dull glow across the yard. A split rail fence leaned along one side, half repaired. No other lights. No tracks but his. Caleb pushed the door open with his shoulder and stepped inside. The room was plain. Table, stove, a narrow bed against the far wall, tools stacked neat along a workbench, everything in its place. He set her down on the edge of the bed, stepped back, gave her space. The quiet settled in thick. Eliza took in the room, every corner, every shadow, counting exits, counting distance. One door, one window, no easy way out. She looked back at him. "You live alone?" "Yes." No explanation. He moved to the stove, added a piece of wood, then poured water from a kettle into a basin, set it on the table, reached for a clean cloth from a folded stack. He didn't bring it to her, just set it down within reach. "You'll need to clean it," he said, "before it stiffens." Eliza stared at the basin, then at him. "You done this before?" she asked. He paused. Just a second. "Enough." She didn't ask more. She turned, reached for the hem of her skirt, and stopped. Her fingers hovered there. Caleb had already turned his back, moved to the other side of the room, picked up a tool, didn't look over. Eliza watched him a long moment. Then she worked. Slow, careful, breath tight between her teeth as she pulled the fabric away from the wound. The cloth stuck in places. She didn't rush it. The water darkened quick. She cleaned what she could reach, wrapped it tight enough to hold. When she was done, her hands were steadier, not strong, but hers again. She leaned back against the wall, eyes closing for just a second. When she opened them, Caleb had set a cup on the table near her. Coffee, weak but hot. He didn't say anything about it. She picked it up, took a sip. It tasted like burned grounds, an iron kettle. She drank it anyway. Across the room, he worked on a piece of wood, planing it smooth with slow, even strokes. The sound filled the space between them. Not loud, just enough. Eliza watched him for a while. The way he moved, the way he kept his distance, the way he didn't ask. After a time, she lay back on the bed, not fully trusting, not sleeping, just letting the weight of the day settle. The lantern light flickered once. Outside, the wind pressed against the walls. Inside, nothing moved but the steady rhythm of his hands. And for the first time in 3 days, no one came through the door. Morning did. Slow and gray, sliding through the window in a thin strip of light that cut across the floorboards and stopped just short of the bed. Eliza woke before the fire had fully gone out. For a moment she didn't move, just listened. No boots outside, no voices, no horses shifting in the yard, only the faint crack of cooling wood in the stove. She pushed herself up on her elbows. The room looked the same. Table, tools, the cup she'd left half full, Caleb's coat hanging by the door. He wasn't inside. Her hand went to where she'd set the revolver. Still there. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, slow, testing weight. The wound pulled tight, but it held. Not good. Not bad. Enough. She stood, made it 2 steps before the world tilted. She caught the edge of the table and waited it out, breathing steady until the floor stopped moving. Outside, a hammer struck wood. Once, then again. She moved to the window. Caleb stood near the fence, back turned, working a loose rail into place. His coat was off despite the cold, sleeves rolled, forearms marked with old lines that didn't match farm work alone. He worked without hurry, like there was no reason to look over his shoulder. Eliza watched him a moment longer, then she turned away. The door opened as she reached the stove. Caleb stepped in, bringing cold air with him. He paused when he saw her on her feet. "You should be lying down." "I've done worse standing," she said. He didn't answer that, just crossed the room, set a small sack on the table, and took the kettle to refill it from the barrel by the door. She noticed the sack, flour, a little, not much. "You go to town?" she asked. He shook his head. "Had it." That was all. He poured water into the kettle, set it back on the stove, then stepped aside like the space belonged to her. Eliza reached for the cup. Her hand brushed his. Just for a second. Neither pulled away too fast. Neither stayed long. The kettle started to hum. They stood there, the space between them quiet but not empty. Then the sound came. Wheels, faint at first, then closer, grinding over dirt and stone, steady, deliberate. Caleb's head turned toward the door. Eliza didn't ask. She already knew. He moved first, crossed to the window, looked out without lifting the curtain all the way. "2 men," he said. "Wagon." "Not riders. Official." Eliza set the cup down. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the table. "They'll have paper," she said. Caleb glanced back at her. "You sure?" She met his eyes. "Paper travels faster than bullets." The wagon stopped outside. A moment passed. Then a knock. Not loud. Not polite either. Just enough to say they weren't asking twice. Caleb didn't move right away. He looked at Eliza, not telling her what to do, just waiting. She straightened, smoothed the front of her skirt with one hand, then reached for the revolver. She didn't raise it, just held it low at her side. "Open it," she said. Caleb crossed the room and pulled the door wide. Cold air rushed in. 2 men stood on the step. One wore a star pinned to his vest, sheriff's badge polished enough to catch the light. The other stood half a step behind, coat clean, boots newer than the ground out here deserved. The sheriff spoke first. "Owen Briggs." Caleb didn't offer his name, just stood there. Briggs looked past him into the room. "Morning," he said. "We're looking for a woman." Eliza stepped forward before Caleb could answer. "I'm right here." Both men shifted their attention to her. The second man smiled, thin and quick. Miss Boone, he said, you've been hard to find. Eliza didn't return the smile. What do you want, Mr. Pike, he said. Harland Pike. The name sat heavy. Caleb's eyes flicked once toward her. Not a question. A mark. Briggs reached into his coat and pulled out folded papers. Got a warrant, he said, tapping the edge against his palm. Signed and proper. He held it out, not stepping inside. Eliza didn't take it. What's it say? She asked. Briggs glanced down at it, though he didn't need to. Says you're wanted for the killing of one Thomas Bell on a transport out of Durango. Says you took possession of documents not belonging to you. Silence filled the room. The wind pressed once against the walls, then passed. Eliza's hand tightened around the revolver. He wasn't murdered, she said. Briggs raised an eyebrow. No. He was burning records, she said. Land deeds, transfers, names tied to them. Pike's smile didn't change. You expect us to believe that? I expect you to read what's in your own papers, she said. Caleb stood on the threshold, one hand resting against the doorframe, still not moving forward, still not stepping back. Briggs shifted his weight. Miss Boone, he said, you can explain all that in town, with a judge. Pike's eyes moved to Caleb. You harboring her? He asked. Caleb didn't answer. Eliza stepped closer to the door. I walked in here, she said, on my own. Pike chuckled under his breath. That's so. Briggs folded the paper again. Either way, he said, she comes with us. The room held still. Caleb looked down once at the worn wood beneath his boots, then back up. She's not leaving tied to a lie. The words came quiet, but they didn't move. Briggs's expression shifted. Not anger. Something colder. Pike's smile faded just enough to show teeth behind it. Well, he said, that complicates things. Outside, the horse stamped once. Inside, no one moved. And for the first time since morning, the door stood open to more than just the cold. They didn't step inside. Not yet. Sheriff Briggs held the folded paper between two fingers, like it carried more weight than it did. Pike stood just behind him, eyes moving slow across the room, taking stock of what wasn't his. Caleb didn't move from the threshold. Eliza stood a few steps back, the revolver low at her side, her weight set careful on the good leg. No one rushed. No one raised a voice. That was what made it worse. You've made your position clear, Briggs said after a while. I won't force this here. Caleb said nothing. Pike let out a small breath, almost amused. Smart man, he said. You don't look like one, but I suppose that's not always the same thing. Caleb's gaze didn't shift. Pike tipped his hat once, more to himself than anyone else, then turned toward the wagon. Briggs followed, slower. Before stepping down, he looked back at Eliza. You come in on your own, he said. You might still have a say in how this goes. Eliza didn't answer. The wagon wheels creaked again as they pulled away, the sound fading down the narrow track until it was swallowed by distance and trees. The door stayed open a moment longer. Then Caleb closed it. The latch clicked into place. Inside, the quiet returned, but it didn't settle the same. Eliza let out a breath she hadn't noticed she'd been holding. They'll come back, she said. Caleb nodded. Not with paper. No. He crossed to the table, picked up the cup she'd left, and set it closer to the stove to warm again. They know where you are now, she added. He didn't look at her. I knew that the second they stopped at the gate. That wasn't bravado, just fact. Eliza watched him. You could still send me out, she said. Say you didn't know, say I forced my way in. He shook his head once. They wouldn't believe it. That's not the point. He turned then. It is. The words came plain, not sharp, not soft. He walked past her, stopped by the door, and checked the bar that ran across it. Wood worn smooth from years of use. It won't hold long, he said. Then don't try to hold it. He looked back at her. What would you do? Eliza didn't answer right away. She moved to the window just enough to see the yard without showing herself. The light was already thinning. Clouds had rolled in from the west, low and heavy. They won't rush in, she said. Not first. They'll wait. Watch. See if you slip. Caleb listened. She turned back. They think you're the kind of man who breaks under pressure. A corner of his mouth shifted, not quite a smile. They've been wrong before. She met his eyes. Doesn't mean they won't try. He nodded. The fire popped once behind them. Then we don't give them the chance, he said. How? He moved to the back of the room and pulled a small box from beneath the workbench. Set it on the table. Opened it. Inside. Ammunition. Clean. Counted. He checked each piece without hurry, hands steady. Eliza watched. You keep that for trouble? She asked. For winter, he said. She almost smiled. Almost. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose rail he'd been fixing that morning. Then another sound. Not wheels this time. Boots. More than two. Caleb didn't look up. He already knew. Eliza reached for the revolver, checked the cylinder by feel. The boots stopped just outside. No knock. A hand hit the door once. Hard. The bar shuddered. Caleb moved then. He stepped to the lantern and blew it out. The room dropped into shadow, lit only by the dull glow of the stove. Back, he said. Eliza didn't argue. He guided her with a touch at her sleeve. Quick, then gone, toward the corner near the bed where the wall angled in. He pressed something into her hand. Small, cold metal. Hold it close, he said. Don't use it unless you see what you're aiming at. She didn't ask what it was. She knew. Another hit on the door. Wood cracked. A voice outside, low and rough. Last chance, Rourke. Caleb didn't answer. The bar bent under the next strike. Splinters jumped from the frame. Eliza's breath slowed. Not from calm, from control. The door gave. Not all at once. Just enough to break the line that held it. A shoulder pushed through, then another. The first man stumbled in, adjusting to the dark. Caleb stepped sideways, not forward, putting himself between the door and the rest of the room. Easy, the man said. We ain't. The shot cut him off, short, loud, contained. The man dropped back against the frame, not moving again. Everything broke loose after that. More bodies pressed at the door, more noise. Boots, wood, breath, confusion. Caleb moved through it like he'd been there before. Not fast, not wild. Each step placed, each motion measured. Eliza stayed where he'd put her, until she saw it. A second man, farther back, raising his gun past Caleb's shoulder. She didn't think, didn't call out. She stepped forward just enough to clear the line and fired. The man jerked, dropped his aim, stumbled out of sight. Silence hit for half a second, then scattered again. Back, Caleb said. But she was already moving, not away, toward, because she could see it now. If she ran, they would follow. If she stayed, it ended here. The last of them broke from the doorway, pulling back into the dark outside. No one chased. The yard went still. The wind took over again, pushing through the broken door, carrying the smell of cold and dirt inside. Caleb stood a moment longer, then lowered his gun. Only then did Eliza see the dark spreading across his shoulder. He hadn't said a word about it. Hadn't even looked. She stepped closer. "You're hit." He glanced down like he'd almost forgotten. "It'll keep." She didn't believe him, but she didn't argue. Outside, no one came back. Not that night. Inside, the door hung crooked on its hinges. The bar split clean down the grain. And for the first time since she'd started running, Eliza Boone didn't think about where to go next, only about what she'd chosen to stand for. The wind moved through the broken doorway, low and steady, carrying the smell of pine and cold ash. Nothing else followed it. No boots, no voices, just the quiet that comes after men decide they've taken enough risk for one night. Caleb leaned one hand against the wall, not heavy, just enough to take the edge off the weight he was holding. His shoulder had gone dark through the shirt, the fabric sticking where it shouldn't. Eliza stepped closer. "Sit," she said. He didn't. She reached out, not asking this time, and pressed her palm lightly against his chest, just below the collarbone. Not pushing, just enough to remind him where he was. "Sit." He looked at her. Something in his eyes shifted. Not pain, not pride. Recognition. He lowered himself onto the chair by the table. The wood creaked under him. Eliza moved without hurry. She took the kettle from the stove, poured what was left into the basin, and set it near him. Her hands were steadier now than they'd been all morning. "Take the coat off." He worked at it one-handed. Missed the sleeve once. She stepped in and finished it for him, careful not to pull too hard. The fabric peeled back slow, the air touching skin that had already started to stiffen. She didn't comment, didn't ask how bad, just cleaned what she could see. The room stayed quiet, but for the soft sound of cloth against skin and the wind slipping through the door. After a while, Caleb spoke. "They won't be gone long." "I know." "They'll bring more." "I know that too." He watched her hands for a second. "You should leave before they do." She didn't look up. "No." A beat passed. "You don't owe me anything," he said. She tied the cloth tighter than before, then stepped back just enough to check the work. "I'm not staying because I owe you." He didn't answer that. Outside, the sky had gone flat gray. Snow would come before nightfall. You could feel it in the way the air settled. Eliza moved to the door and pushed it closed as far as the broken hinge would allow. It didn't meet the frame right anymore. Not fully. She wedged a block of wood against it, not to keep people out, just to slow them. Behind her, Caleb stood again. Too soon. She turned. "You sit when I tell you to." He didn't argue this time, just leaned back against the table instead, one hand braced. A sound came from the yard. Not boots. Wheels. Slower than before. Deliberate. Eliza's head turned toward the door. Caleb's hand moved, not for a weapon, just resting near where it would be. The wagon stopped. A voice called out, clear and even. "Caleb Rourke." Not Pike, not Briggs. Different, older. Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly. "Thomas Grady," he said under his breath. Eliza didn't know the name, but she heard the change in his tone. Not fear. Something closer to caution. The door opened again, pushing past the block with a low scrape. A man stepped in, brushing snow from his coat. No badge on his chest, but the weight of authority sat on him just the same. He looked once around the room, at the broken hinge, at the blood on the floorboards, at Eliza, then back to Caleb. "Looks like you had visitors." Caleb didn't answer. Grady reached into his coat and pulled out a folded set of papers, thicker than the ones Briggs carried, sealed. "I'm not here to take her," he said. Eliza's grip tightened at her side. "Then why are you here?" Grady turned to her. Because what you've been carrying around is about to get a lot of people in trouble. He held the papers out. She didn't take them. He set them on the table instead. Copies, he said, of the same records you saw burned. Caleb looked at Eliza, not asking, confirming. Grady went on. Pike's name is on every one of them, along with a few others who thought distance and time would keep it buried. The room stayed still. Sheriff Briggs? Eliza asked. Under review by morning, Grady said, assuming he hasn't already tried to leave. Eliza let out a breath. Not relief. Not yet. Why now? Grady shrugged once. Because men like Pike get careless when they think they've already won. He stepped back toward the door. It's finished, he added. At least the part that needed guns. No one stopped him when he left. The wagon rolled away the same way it came. Slow. Certain. The wind filled the space again. Eliza stood by the table, looking at the papers without touching them. Across the room, Caleb moved to the door and pulled it closed once more, setting the block back in place. Not for safety, just for order. The light shifted as the afternoon faded. Neither of them spoke for a while. There was nothing left to argue. Nothing left to prove. Eliza stepped outside just before dusk. The air had gone softer. Snow starting to fall in thin, quiet lines. Caleb was at the fence again. Same rail as before. Same steady hands. She walked up beside him. Didn't say anything. Just picked up the spare hammer leaning against the post and held it out. He looked at it. Then at her. A small nod. He took it. They worked side by side as the snow settled in. No rush. No need. Behind them, the cabin stood with its door not quite right, its frame still marked from the night before. Ahead of them, the line of fence stretched out across the land, uneven but standing. Eliza drove one nail in, then another. Caleb set the next board. Neither looked away, and for the first time since the shot echoed across the mountain. There was nowhere else either of them needed to be. The snow kept falling, soft enough that it didn't ask for anything in return. It settled on the fence, on the roof, on the ground where blood had once marked a line someone couldn't cross back over. But lines can change, not all at once, not clean, just a board at a time, a choice at a time. Eliza didn't stop running because the world suddenly turned kind. She stopped because she found a place where she didn't have to prove she deserved to stand. And Caleb, he didn't become a different man. He just stayed long enough, steady enough, for someone to see who he'd been all along. Out there, people still talk. They always will. About who belongs, about who doesn't, about what a person is worth when no one's watching. But a quiet truth settled in that cabin before the snow did. Sometimes, you don't need someone to pull you out of the dark. You just need someone who doesn't step away when you're still in it. So if you'd been standing where Eliza stood, would you have kept running or turned back and chosen to stay? If this story stayed with you, there are more waiting just down the trail. Stories about people who lost their way, and the ones who stood still long enough to help them find it again. You're always welcome by the fire.